Welcome back to another episode of the SDR Game podcast. Today I'm excited to introduce Jed Mahrle, Head of Outbound Sales at Mailshake. You might know him on LinkedIn and his newsletter, Practical Prospecting. Jed, great to have you here.
Yeah, super happy to be here, Albert. Appreciate you setting it up.
Super excited for today, but before we start our conversation, can you introduce yourself for those people who don't know you already?
Yeah, for sure. I'm the head of Outbound Sales at Mailshake. I've been here for about 3 months. I kind of started my career in the SDR SaaS space about 3 years ago at a company called PandaDoc. Started there as an SDR and kind of helped build out the outbound SDR team, ended up managing it. And then, like I said, 3 months ago, came over to Mailshake. So, that's pretty much my background. And then I run a newsletter called Practical Prospecting, where I share kind of prospecting and SDR advice and tactics.
Today, we're going to talk about a topic that I know you are sharing a lot recently on LinkedIn, but also on other podcasts. And I'm super interested to learn more about that with you because basically you said, and there's a massive problem right now with SDR orgs in general, and that no one is talking about. Basically, it's that cold emails are ending up in spam. We talk generally about open and reply rates, that we need to improve that. But the thing is, if you are not thinking about your email deliverability, well, that's not useless to improve, but that's something you need to think about. What happened at PandaDoc to make you think about your email deliverability? What did you see?
Yeah, so I think it is a really big problem, and it starts with the fact that I think right around the time COVID happened, a lot more cold emails were going out. I think there's literally statistics that show like a 40% increase in the amount of cold emails going out. And so as a result, all these email servers, Outlook, Gmail, they started tightening up their restrictions because they want to create a good experience for their users and they don't want spam to get through. And so we started to notice this at PandaDoc for that reason. And then also because we scaled the team so fast. We had like 3 SDRs and then a year later we had 20. And so that's almost 3x or 7x the number of emails going out as a result of that growth. So there's, as a result, it started to hurt our deliverability. Our open rates were starting to go down, even though we were sending the same types of emails. So that's really where I started to notice it. And I think it's you might have seen on my content where I say, it's a massive problem no one's talking about because it is. Everybody's still focused on the same things. They're like, oh, just write a better email, just write a better subject line. But that doesn't matter if your email is ending up in the spam folder. And I started thinking about this stuff a lot more when I joined Mailshake, since that's a big part of what we do. And there's so many things that have to happen behind the scenes before you even think about the content of your email to make sure you're set up for the most success in terms of cold email deliverability.
And before we talk about that, how many emails did your team was sending at PandaDoc? You said you had 3 at the beginning and then 20, and you said that was 7x the volume. So how many emails did they send?
Probably like 100 to 200 per day per rep.
You saw that, and then what did you do to prevent that?
Well, we didn't fully fix the problem is the thing. We started to.
Okay.
And shout out to Stephen Chase on my team, who really started to do more research on the concept of email deliverability. He kind of brought it to me as well. So some of the things he started doing was warming up emails, fixing like the domain records, DKIM, DMARC, SPF, just a bunch of weird acronyms that basically mean you have authentication to send out cold emails. And without those records, a lot of spam filters won't let you through. They're looking, hey, do you have DMARC? If not, we're going to send you to the spam folder. So those are two of the things. The second, and then the third thing is just scaling down the number of emails we were sending out. But we didn't fix the entire problem. But those are the kind of the two main things: warming up emails and fixing the domain health.
And when you say warming up, for example, what do you do? Do you use a second domain for sending emails, what's your process with warming up a domain?
A warm-up tool, there's warm-up tools out there. And what a warm-up tool does is, if you think about one domain, right? You have a whole company on one domain. Email servers expect a certain ratio of email opens and email responses to come from that domain. And so if you don't meet that threshold of number of responses you should be getting when you're sending out emails to that domain, email servers will notice that and say, hey, this kind of looks like somebody who's spamming. And so if you got the SDR team who's only getting a 1% reply rate, and that SDR team is 20, but the rest of the company, they're just sending regular emails, getting responses, that still hurts the domain as a whole. And so what email warmup does is it runs in the background. It sends emails on your behalf to a database of contacts that then responds to those emails, marks them as important, takes them out of the spam folder, and that just runs in the background. So it's kind of like robots for your email, or I like to call them steroids for your email. And it almost tricks the email servers that you have, a higher open rate, a higher reply rate, so that when you do actually email your prospects, you're going to land in the primary inbox more often because you have this email warm up running in the background. So we started looking at tools like that, and I didn't know about email warm up tools for the longest time, but it's a big hack. It really helps with the open rates and landing in the inbox.
Warming up your inbox, did you do that also at Pananoc? Because I imagine if you already have are sending emails, warming up your inbox after, it helped you reduce this?
Yeah, I mean, you always want to use it. We used it for a long time, and I think with email warm up, you want to keep it running 24/7. The analogy I like to give is that, if I'm in the MLB, if I'm a baseball player and steroids were legal, then I would use steroids, right? And I think of email warm up as steroids for your email. So why not use them? It's only going to help. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was step number one. We say warming up your inbox, and then also you are talking about having your inbox set up. Did you do it, or did someone help you with that at Panadoc?
We didn't, like I said, we didn't fully fix the problem at PandaDoc, so that
Yeah.
might not, like, we got so far, but yeah, I mean, especially at a company the size of PandaDoc, where we had 700 employees, you really have to get IT involved. So there's a lot of technical things that go into it because IT owns, I'm an SDR manager. I don't have access to the whole domain for the whole company. So it comes with a lot of, but this is why it's hard, is because you have to be able to communicate with your IT team and say, hey, this is a problem. We need to fix this. We need to set up these authentications. And, a lot of companies that maybe they don't have the best communication between sales and IT. But that's where we started the conversation there, and you really need IT's help to get those things fixed.
And that's something we did at Chili Piper not almost 2 years ago.
Nice.
With Jesse, that I know you did a webinar with him at the beginning of August, and so he helped us with that. And yeah, we had to talk with the dev team to help us with that, basically.
Yep.
You started to talk about tools. What tools can someone use to first warming their inbox, but also anything else that they can use to improve email deliverability?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things. So one of the other big ones is not using your primary domain for cold email. And a lot of companies are still doing this, and we were still doing it at PandaDoc too. But it's not a really well-known topic. I mean, if you're going to be sending cold emails, you probably want to create like a chilipiper.co and then have chilipiper.com be your main domain. And that serves as, for one reason, it's protection in case that domain starts to get locked out. It's not going to prevent your CEO from sending, because like it's happened where SDRs are spamming so much on the primary domain, and then a CEO who needs to send an email to their investor, it lands in the spam folder because the SDRs have messed up the email domain. So create a separate domain, warm that up. That's one of the biggest things. We talked about the email warm up, setting up the authentications. There's also other things, like there's certain formatting and words that will get triggered by the spam folder. So like easy ones, like if you use the word free, for example, that's going to make it more likely that you'll end up in the spam folder because Gmail and these sort of servers are looking for those things. And then removing links and images from your email signature, especially if you're doing outbound. Like how often are they clicking a link on an outbound email or clicking on a book a meeting link? You want to remove all links to optimize the amount of the potential that you'll land in the inbox. And then the last thing is there's two other things. Also, making sure your lists are clean. So use like a list cleaning tool, or if you're using like ZoomInfo or Seamless, turn up the data accuracy, because especially right now with the way people are changing jobs or people are getting laid off, when you're sending emails out, a lot more of them are bouncing. And every time that email bounces, it's going to hurt your domain. So you really want to keep that bounce rate below like 3%. And if it's above that, you're really going to start running into trouble with your domain over time. And so those are kind of the high level things. You can get a lot more technical than that, but I think that's a good starting point.
That's a good point. I have a question about the second email domain, because that's something, I don't know if it was from JC or someone else. What I've heard also about using the main domain of the company when you have your marketing team sending emails also via a newsletter, for example, that's something you can help with your score for the spam filters. What do you think about that? Did you saw some help from that, or you prefer not to use a second domain?
I do. I prefer to use it. I did see help from it. As soon as you set up the domain, you're not going to have the highest open rate right away because you got to warm it up. That's where if you use a warm up tool with the second domain, it does help and it makes a difference. So Yeah, I'm all for it. And that's what we're doing at Mailshake right now.
Now at Milkshake, that's something you started to do since day one at Milkshake. So maybe not day one, but that's on month one. That's something you worked on.
Absolutely, yeah. Since day one, like when we get a new SDR, like, and like, let's say I hired you and you're starting 2 weeks from now, we're gonna warm up your email that day so that your email is warmed up by the time you start.
And how often do you track that now?
Yeah, I mean it's weekly. It's always something we're looking at. People don't. I see a lot of talk around like open rates being the vanity metric or whatnot. I think that's just completely untrue. That's something I'm tracking weekly, if not more.
Yeah.
Because if our open rates start to dip like below 60%, I want to know what's going on. And the reason why open rates are so important is because let's say you have a lot of people are okay with a 30% open rate, and let's say they get a 2% reply rate. So that means for every 100 emails, you get 2 replies because 30% open. If you're able to double that to 60%, which is absolutely doable, then you're going to double the number of replies you get. So if the copywriting is good as getting replies, you want as many people as possible to see that email. And a lot of people don't get that. They're like, oh, open rates are a vanity metric. But that's why I think it's super crucial because I feel good about our copy. So I want to make sure as many eyeballs are seeing it as possible.
You're right. If you want also to track if you're getting spam because you're not improving that. So now my next question I have also around that because now we are talking about email deliverability. What else can we do to improve your deliverability? Is there something else?
No, I mean, those are the main things, right? There's super technical things that we can, I don't know if you want, how technical you want to get on this one, but we can get really technical. But then there's also things that are, yeah, then it's like making sure you're properly A/B testing, and then we start getting into like copy and writing better emails, which does have to do with email deliverability. But though everything I highlighted are the main things in terms of what's not being talked about that you should do to fix your email deliverability.
Okay, so we talk about warming up your inbox, having the proper settings for your domain also, and then you are talking about using a second domain to send those emails. Actually, you mentioned the keywords that you don't want to use in spam filters. You mentioned free. Do you have any other examples?
Yeah, there's an article. HubSpot has a really good article. If you look up, it's like top 396 or something words you shouldn't use in your email. It's like some random number like that. But if you look up HubSpot spam words, you'll see it pop up on Google, or maybe you can provide the link when the podcast comes out. But I looked through that article and then I went through all of our sequences and said, and just removed those, like any sort of words like that. And then it's like formatting, like don't use bolded words, italics, that sort of stuff. You want to just do simple text, plain format. And then, yeah, if you look at that article, you'd be surprised at how many kind of words are in there. But that's what I mean, the servers are smart. Like they just want to make sure that nobody's spamming, and they'll take a chance by sending a regular email to spam.
I'll share that in the description of the episode. Then you mentioned about removing links, but also images. And then the last one is also making sure you have your emails that are verified also to send that. Now, you started also to talk about that already. So that's step number one if you want to make sure that your emails are not in spam. Now, the next question is around open rate. What can you do to improve your open rate? So obviously you have subject lines. You can tweak your first line also. You can multi-thread also. What do you do also to improve your open rates?
Deliverability is the foundation for that. You touched on it, the subject line. So like a few quick subject line tips. I'm sure everybody's heard the one where like use 1 to 3 words, as little words as possible. But I just like to lowercase everything. Because like if you see a marketing email, they're always capitalized. So I'll even if it's their name, I'm lowercasing it. It's a lowercase e. So lowercase the subject lines as short as possible. I like to just pull out, like, for example, our software is for salespeople, and I was working at Panadoc. It was also a software for salespeople. So what I would do is I'd grab the name of one of their reps, and so I would just put like Elric in this as the subject line. And you're going to open that because that's one of your reps, and the subject line is the name of the reps. And then I tie in the email into how our software could help you, how our software could help that specific rep. So I'm making a subject line that's very bold. It's their employee's name, or it's the person on their team, or it's one of their colleagues. But then I'm still tying in the email to that bold subject line, and that's been something that helps a lot. Just go on LinkedIn, find one of their colleagues' names, put that in the subject line, but then figure out how to actually appropriately tie that into the email. And then, so the subject lines, that's one of the big things for open rates. The next, you touched on it, preview lines. What is that text that they're going to see without opening the email? And I like, there's a couple things. I think the biggest thing is I always start my emails out with the context of why I'm reaching out, or like a trigger point.
Yeah.
So I'll make that very specific. So I might be reaching out, and my contacts and my triggers because they just joined the company, or they just got a promotion to a role where maybe they're looking at software like this, or they're hiring people that we would sell to. They're hiring SDRs, and we sell for SDRs. So I'll call that out and say, "Hey, saw you just added 3 or 4 SDRs in the last couple months," and it's some sort of like personalization or something very relevant in that first line, not just like, considering you're a VP of sales in the software industry sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like something specific. But yeah,
I saw your LinkedIn profile and I reach out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Something specific that they're going to see.
Basically, yeah, that's pretty good to help you. So yeah, with your parent. So just to come back on the subject line, so you are talking about using the name of an employee, and I really like that because I think that if you use that in a subject line, that's not something you can send that to every company because that's specific to them, and then you use that also on the body of the email. So that's really good because it shows that's specific to them. For the preview line, what you mentioned also about adding some context also, that's why also I think some people are not talking about subject line because they think that the subject line is the only thing that impacts your open rate. But generally, when you check your emails on your laptop or on your phone, generally you can see, I think it's 18 words on your laptop, and then on your phone it's like 10 words, something like that. And then they can decide if they're going to open it or not. And showing them that you see something about them and that's specific to them, that impact. What other tips do you have for helping with open rate?
I think those are two. Those are we've just covered the 3 biggest ones: deliverability, your actual subject line, and then the context or the preview line. The next thing that I also don't think a lot of people talk about is what's going on behind the scenes that actually directly impacts those open rates. So, for example, anytime I send my initial email, or pretty much any email, or we'll just start with the initial email. So, what I'm always doing is I'm either calling right before that and then leaving a voicemail saying, "Hey, Elric, about to send over an email. Subject line is XYZ. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Shoot me a reply when you get the chance." And then the email goes out right away. So they got that voicemail that points to their email, which is going to directly impact the open rate because they have that familiarity. The second thing I do, because I don't always want to make a cold call before I've even sent a single email, is I will connect on LinkedIn, and it's literally just a simple message. And sometimes it's all it takes is like, "Hey, Elric, sending over an email shortly. Just wanted to put a face in the name. Subject line is XYZ." And that's my connection request message, and it points people to the email. And so that also directly impacts the open rates. So whether you're doing a quick touch on LinkedIn that's pointing to the email, or a phone call with a voicemail that's pointing to the email, do something outside of the actual email itself that's going to point to them opening the email. And it should only take a couple seconds, and that's going to help boost those open rates as well.
And also, I think something when you do that, also leveraging another channel to point them to your email.
Yeah.
What I'm talking a lot with my team also, it's when you put some effort, for example, to write your emails, that's something you don't just want to send an email and then wait that they open it. And like you just mentioned, you call them also, connect with them on LinkedIn to point them to this email, because if you are putting some efforts to an account, you want to make sure that this prospect or this person are going to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was yesterday you were talking about, I'm going to read the post.
Yeah.
What you mentioned is should you alter your sales approach during an economic downturn? And you talk about your method, the Jedi method. So what is that?
Yeah, well, so I'm going to be sharing it on the Hype Cycle Go-to-Market Games. It's so the thing behind that post, and I think it's really relevant to what's going on right now, is obviously there is an economic downturn, and it kind of raises a question of, should you change your approach? Can you still get away with the same amount of activities? Can you still get away with the same types of activities, or do we have to alter our approach? So some ideas I've heard being shared are, you should change your messaging to be a little bit more focused around, reducing risk or saving costs, things like that, where we're changing our messaging with the times of what's going on, similar to maybe what happened right when COVID hit and everybody was going crazy in like April 2020. So the Jedi method is kind of, it's a lot of stuff that I've kind of shared through Practical Prospecting, my newsletter. And it's kind of funny. It's more just like a name to share ideas. It's more like a branded name, Justin Michael. just actually branded it as the Jedi method as a play on my name. But I think the key thing that I'll be sharing is that whenever I talk about any sort of prospecting strategy, I always come with the approach of less is more. So shortening your emails, shortening your cold calls, always just trying to find the relevance and why you're reaching out. And I think that's the biggest thing, and just kind of sticking to the fundamentals. So get really good at copywriting. That's a big thing I talk about, is like a lot of my success as SDR just came from being really good at copywriting, from just staying consistent with my activities. So there's no like silver bullet magic strategies I'm going to be sharing. I think more what I'll be sharing is how to get really good at the fundamentals, because I think that's most important right now during like an economic downturn, because um, the tactics maybe worked 6 months, a year ago are not going to work as well now, because people are looking at emails as much. Like, you have to be consistent with your activities. You have to up your copywriting skills. You have to probably increase the number of activities, and this is the time to really like focus on getting really good at your sales skills.
When you say, for example, improve your copywriting skills, what do you do to, what do you read? Is it a book? Or what do you do to improve your copywriting skills?
Yeah, it's really funny. It's like, so I played basketball growing up in high school, and I loved basketball. And if someone was asking me how did you get better at basketball, my answer would be I played basketball, and I practiced basketball.
Yeah,
And so I have people ask me like, how do you get good at copywriting? I'm like, you have to write.
I
Like,
practice.
you just
Yeah,
have to practice. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, like they hate the fact of writing. And so the way I got good at it, I guess, was just directing my focus towards it. It starts with saying, this is a goal I want. I want to get good at copywriting. And it started with consistently posting on LinkedIn, even if they were crappy posts. If you scroll down, you'll see a lot of shitty posts. Um, and it was just consistently writing. And I figured that, writing every day and making some sort of post, even if it's bad, even if it's just bad, like it wasn't a good
yeah,
post, the fact that I showed up and did it every day, naturally I'm going to improve. Um, I heard Landon Meyer, I'm sure you've seen him on LinkedIn recently.
yep.
He talked about for 90 days, he made 3 LinkedIn posts a day for 90 days straight. If you commit to something like that, you're going to get good at copywriting. There were some books I read. Everybody Writes is a really good book, which is some tactical stuff. Copywriter's Handbook is really dense, but there's a lot of good strategies in there and like tactical stuff. But those are 2 good books. And then the second thing was just watching successful posts on LinkedIn and trying to break that down. And I know I'm talking about LinkedIn copywriting, but
Yeah.
all of that transfers over to cold email. You want to make it spaced. You want to do short sentences, fifth grader level. All the basic copywriting things that you practice on LinkedIn apply to cold email.
I saw on the post also you are talking about focusing on learning about your recipe. A lot of SDRs, they don't focus on that because they think knowing your recipe is not that important as knowing the last tactic, for example, because they love to see, to go after the silver bullets that you can find. I've listened to your episode with Kaylee on this podcast the other day, and I know you talk about that, but I think it's super valuable to talk about it again. What do you do to learn about your recipe? If you're an SDR, just starting or want to learn more about recipes?
I was the same way. Like, it's not a knock on anybody, but like when my first 6 months as an SDR, I was just on LinkedIn trying to find the next tactic. You know what I mean? And so all I was doing was just hammering the phones, blasting out emails, and just trying to find the quickest way to success. And the thing is, I was actually getting close to my targets because I was just putting in an insane amount of activity, but it was like burning me out. And so I was like, there had to be a better way. So it really started with, you have to be really intentional, trying to understand your ICP, because again, what happens when you understand your ICP really well is all of your messaging becomes a lot more relevant. You're having better conversation on the phone. Your copywriting improves. So like your emails land a lot better. Your LinkedIn messages, they land a lot better. So just by understanding, who to focus on and who to not. So when you get your accounts to go after, you're not just like mindlessly prospecting the wrong people. You're figuring out who is the right person to talk to. So it's a huge time saver, and it makes everything you do more
Yeah.
efficient. The things that I did to start doing that were, I would go and listen to demo recordings. That's one of the biggest
Yeah.
ones. And then try to pull out the specific language that the prospects were using. Um, so like pull out specific language from demo recordings. I would go on G2 Crowd and look at our reviews and say, how are people talking about my product? Let me use that language and try to learn from that. I would interview people at my company. So when I was at PandaDoc, we sold to salespeople. I wasn't an AE, so I had no idea what it was like to want to close a deal or have a deal go dark or waiting for that e-signature to come through, you close the deal. So I would talk to our AEs about it, talk to our director of sales, talk to our VP of sales. These are all people I sold to, so I want to learn how they think. So I call that like interviewing your internal ICP. Looking at your inbound leads, right? So look at uh, what sort of leads are coming inbound, why are they coming inbound, what are like the patterns you can find. And so there's a long list of things you can do, but they're really hard and they're not things that are going to immediately lead to you booking a meeting. So you have to make time in your calendar for that. Maybe you got to do it on a weekend. Maybe you got to wake up early and do it. Maybe you got to do it after work. You have to find time for these things to be more intentional, to really research and then kind of game plan around how you're going to improve your messaging. But those are the main things I did to understand my ICP.
That's really good because, for example, the specific language, that's something. Then you can use that in your outreach also, because you can use the same exact words that your prospect or customer are currently using, for example, when they talk to UAEs or to your CS team, for example. Because what I've seen in the past, generally, in the previous companies, they love to use like buzzwords on the website, and then generally you want to use the same words, but that's not the words that your prospect or customer are using. So I really like that. When I started Shipper, for example, I'm watched every case study we have on top of what you mentioned. And why? I know it's us recording this, so it's an interview with customers, but what I really like is the story behind why, for example, they bought Chili Pepper. So you have the before, the problems they have, and that's super powerful too, because you can talk about that after when you have a prospect on the phone, for example, and then you have the after. And when I imagine at Panadoc or at Mailchimp, when you have different personas, it's super interesting to have the specific problems for each persona and the outcome of that, because then you can, now when you're reaching out to a VP of sales or a VP of marketing, you can understand the pains that they are currently having, and then how, with Chili Pepper, for example, you can solve that. And I think one last thing also, it's listen or consume content they consume. For example, for Chili Pepper, I think one of the personas we have is marketing or demand gen leaders, and there is some obviously podcasts or content over that. What I'm learning a lot is going just to listen to those podcasts, and you can leverage that also in your outreach.
I like that. That's awesome. So you're talking about like going through the content that your customers are engaging with, right? Yeah, I haven't thought about that. That's interesting.
If you find the thought leaders of your personas, you can also think about differently about that, because the interviews with customers, I think that's great, and that's good to learn about how your products solve their challenges, but also having the thought leaders there of the industry, that's interesting also.
Yeah, I agree.
I saw another post that I really enjoyed. That something is shifting your outbound approach from the me to them, basically. For those who are listening, basically, it's instead of focusing on you and your outcome, it's focusing on the outcome of your prospect. You mentioned 3 things. Optimizing for interests, not meetings. So that's number 1. Leading with value, not ask. And then spending more time up front, getting info from the bottom up, for example. How can you implement that, for example, for someone who are listening today? Yep,
absolutely. So, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. It's difficult. We live in a place where we just want like immediate results, and as an SDR, like we're looking for the next sort of silver bullet. We've been talking about it throughout this whole podcast, and so this is another one of those things you have to be a little bit more intentional. And this was something that personally helped me a lot. I was very focused on every single cold call. I'm just trying to get the meeting. All my emails, they ask for a meeting. But when you kind of shift your focus and slow down a little bit and realize, if I just ask for interest, or if I even send emails where it's just like, hey, I saw you're a new SDR manager. A lot of SDR managers are looking for ways to, increase their open and reply rate on cold email. Here's a playbook we created, that Mailchimp created, and I send them that blog post or that webinar, or just send them some sort of content without an ask. Then they might reply and say, oh, I appreciate that. Those are the sort of things I'm optimizing for. So try to change your approach in the sense that you're not just asking, because you're only going to get a small number of people from doing that. If you lead with value, if you are a little bit more focused on just starting a conversation, I know all that sounds nice, but the tactical ways you do that are just sending content, sending resources that's going to be relevant to them. Then you can go back in for an ask 3 days later, or just say, hey, like, what were your thoughts on that content? If you're up for a call, we can discuss further. And you make it a lot more appealing to them to actually want to join that call. Wherever you work, whatever company you're at, you are the expert at that thing. So like Chili Piper is the experts at, optimizing your funnel, for example, or making sure nothing slips, like no inbound lead slips through the cracks. So you guys, your SDRs can reach out and be like, hey, a lot of SDR managers are looking for just some tactics around making sure none of their inbound leads slip through the cracks. Are you up for a call to just share ideas? That doesn't sound like a Chili Piper demo at all. But if I'm an SDR manager and somebody from Chili Piper reached out to me with that, I'm like, yeah, that sounds really interesting. Let's jump on a call. And then what we find is that naturally you start talking about Chili Piper. So think about like what your expertise is in, and then just try to share the things you learned from talking about your product all day. You're an expert about your product. Share what's going to be valuable to them, and naturally conversations about your product will start. And so that's kind of what I meant from shifting it from me to them focus, because it requires more patience. You won't book the meeting immediately every time, but you'll book more meetings in the long run. And it's a lot harder. It's harder for people to kind of to see that long-term vision, but it's definitely worth it, and it's something to consider.
I have two questions here. One is, how do you implement that, for example, in your sequences? Do you start with that on your cadences? On your first emails, you try to give value. What's your approach?
Yeah, so like half of our emails don't even have an ask. They're just like, here you go. And so all of our sequences, cadences, campaigns, whatever you want to call them, are based around some sort of trigger event. So like a really common one is they're hiring SDRs. So the whole sequence, any lead we put into that sequence is a sales leader who's hiring SDRs. And so some of our emails will be asked for like, are you open to learning more, or maybe a demo? But a lot of our emails are like, hey, new SDR lead or SDR, people who are hiring SDRs are typically looking for, relating it to Mailshake, since we're like cold email software, are looking for ways to, increase reply rates and open rates for those SDRs. Here's a playbook we created. And so it's literally just that, or do you want the playbook? And then it forces them to respond and say, here you go, here's a playbook. So yeah, like half of our emails are just not asking. And I'm literally going on Mailshake's website, finding cool content that our marketing team created, or a webinar that I think legitimately would be valuable. And I'm putting that into the emails and saying, hey, here, do you want this sort of content? And then we're relating it to the triggers. So like somebody who's hiring SDRs are thinking about ways to like start building that team out. Somebody who's new to a team might be looking for different types of content. So you want to like focus the content around the trigger of the context of why you're reaching out.
Did you read The Ultimate Sales Machine by Jed Mahrle?
No.
So there is a chapter about I think it's called the buying pyramid. And what they talk about on this pyramid, basically, it's you have 3% of your prospect in the market who are in buying mode. Then you have 7% who are actively looking for a solution for the problems. Then you have people who knows that they have a problem, but they don't know if there is a solution to solve that. So it's 30%. Then you have 30% people that doesn't care about solving this issue. And then you have 30% of people that they know that they don't know they have a problem, and they don't know about the solution. And having this approach, basically, generally when you have people prospecting, they only focus on those people who are buying mode. So when you have emails just to ask for a meeting or demo, you have really low reply rate, because if you don't have a need for this solution, that's why you don't have a lot of replies. But with an approach like this, when you educate your prospect, that's having this approach is, like you said, it's for the long term, but that definitely makes a difference, because you're not just talking to those people who are in buying mode, you're talking to a larger audience, basically.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I didn't even think about it like that. If you're like kind of leading with value in that sense, you're not making asks. Because like to your point, if you put 100 prospects into a sequence and all of your messaging is just demo, at most you're going to book like 3, right? Because like you said, 3%. But if you kind of have this long-term approach, you're going to get those people who were in buying mode anyways, but then you're going to start conversations with the rest who are like more in that discovery phase, and you might book 10, 15, but those 10, 15 might not come right away. They might come over the next month sort of thing.
Exactly, but also it's when you, I don't know all the research you have on that, but I know Gartner talk a lot about that. That right now, and by the way, I've seen a post today talking about that. They mention your prospects. They spend 5% of their time with your sales team when they are buying a software, for example. So it means that generally they say when they say yes to a demo that they already done some research when they say yes to the demo. So if you are making helping them in finding a solution to their problem, that make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
We are almost at the end, and so now I have one question for you. What question do you have for me?
Ooh, what question I have for you?
Yeah.
What has been your biggest struggle as an SDR leader? Like, what has been the hardest thing for you to, like, the hardest challenge for you as an SDR leader?
I think it's the switch from the individual contributor mindset to serving the team. What I mean by that is when you're an SDR, I think you have different skills you need to focus on, and when you master them, I would say, yeah, cold calling, cold emailing, copywriting. You start as a manager, and then I think being a manager or leader, basically, it's a new job actually. Yes, you know how to prospect, but now you need to learn how to coach people. You need how to train. You need to hire, and there is so much skills that you don't have generally. You need to develop and you need to learn. And I think where I'm struggling, it's if SDR, it's maybe you need 15 skills to master. Managing people, I think it's for leading a team, it's like 30 skills, different skills. And it's where do you need to prioritize that? For what you need to prioritize to have an impact? Because you can master, I don't know, right now, if I were talking about forecasting, for example, for a team. And those forecasting is important as coaching skills. And that's really where I'm struggling because sometimes I think I need to improve on one skill, and then I'm changing that. Every week I'm changing, not every week, but every quarter I try to really revisit my focus for the quarter.
I resonate with that a lot. There's so many different things you have to focus on as an SDR manager. And I think another big one too is like, you want to show your team that you still got it, that you can still prospect, but you have to focus on coaching, but you still want to, like, you know, make cold calls with the team, that sort of thing. But yeah, I love that answer.
And what's your biggest challenge, struggle?
I think there's a lot of, I think this probably happens with a lot of like high performers, I guess, is there was things that maybe are really hard to like conceptualize and teach that made you successful, you know, or that you did when you were an SDR. And that's one of the hardest things is like, how can I break that down and really teach this person so they understand? Because there's basic things. Like you can teach cold calling scripts, you can teach how to write a good email. Well, there's like just certain things around prospecting and being a strong SDR that are really hard to teach. And so my biggest struggle has been like, how can I really just break down everything that has made me a successful SDR and teach that and coach that as much as possible. And that's one area where I've struggled the most is like figuring out how I can best coach. Because coaching is very difficult. You know, they have to be bought in. And so it kind of aligns with that. Yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing.
I agree with you on that because that's also, it's not coming with this mindset of you want to replicate mini use basically, because I know sometimes I think that's maybe at the beginning that's something I was trying to do. Also, it's try to replicate a version of me. So I was, when I was an SDR, I was doing this, so you need to do that. Now I'm more focused on, hey, what's the strengths and the weaknesses of the person and trying to focus on that also.
Yeah, man, it's tough. It's, coaching is, I think I saw a post from Scott Leese the other week where he said coaching is like leg day. You know, everybody wants to skip leg day, but coaching is like leg day for sales managers. And it's like probably the most impactful thing you can do, but it's also probably like the most difficult and hardest thing to do.
Because I think coaching also, there is also coaching opportunities. You don't need to wait for one-on-ones or stuff like that. And sometimes, like you said, you can be lazy about it. And I think right now I'm really improving on that. So if I'm trying to improve on that, in the past it was just waiting for the one-on-one to have coaching session. Now it's first to have the team also being comfortable on that, to look for more coaching opportunities, and then the second is every one-on-one try to have coaching opportunities also.
Yeah, I like that. Be more proactive.
Yep. Well, we are at the end of the interview, so thanks so much, Jed, for the interview. The conversation, it was great.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. This is super fun. I love the question at the end too. I like it.